Hello everyone. For this session, our topic is about types of muscle contraction and force generation. Me and my partner, Joseph Bonclores, will tackle this topic and explain to you about the different types of muscle contraction. Okay, these are the contents that we are going to tackle for this report. Um, Muscle fiber contraction, excitation contraction coupling, role of calcium in the muscle fiber, sliding filament theory, energy for muscle contraction, muscle relaxation, and all the types of muscle contraction, including the generation of force. Slide please. Okay, muscle fiber contraction. It is an alpha motor neuron. It's a nerve cell that connects with and innervates muscle fiber. The picture on the left is called a motor unit, which is composed of a single alpha motor neuron and a muscle fiber. In between the motor unit is the neuromuscular junction, where nervous and muscular system communicates. So, if the alpha motor neuron is activated, muscle fibers will contract. Next, please. Next is excitation contraction coupling. It is a complex sequence of events that triggers a muscle fiber to contract. This event is initiated by an action potential. Action potential is a rapid and substantial depolarization of the neuron's membrane that travels through the action terminals, which sends signals to release acetylcholine. The acetylcholine will now cross the neuromuscular junction and binds to the acetylcholine receptors, which triggers the depolarization that allows sodium to enter the cytoplasm, and the action potential will now be transmitted to the muscle fiber. Next slide, please. So the role of the calcium in the muscle fiber. Calcium ions are stored in the cytoplasmic reticulum. The movement of action potential through the T tubules allows the release of calcium ions in the cytoplasmic reticulum through the sarcoplasm. Once calcium are released, they will bind to troponin and move the tropomyosin out of the binding sites. Myosin can now bind to actin molecules, forming a cross bridge. So now it will generate muscle contraction. So the role of the calcium, calcium in the muscle fibers is to uh, remove the tropomyosin out of the binding sites so that the myosin can form a cross bridge, cross bridge formation that allows the contraction. Next slide, please. So the sliding filament theory, it is the repeating attachment of the myosin to the actin molecules. The filament moves towards the thick filament and to the center of the sarcomere. It is initiated by the power stroke. Power stroke is the tilting of the myosin head, resulting for the muscle to contract and the sarcomeres and myofibrils shortens. So sliding filament theory is the movement of the thick and thin filaments cross path between each other. So when that happens, the sarcomeres and myofibril shortens with the help of the power stroke with the use of the energy. So next slide, please. So like what I said, in order to thin filament and thick filament cross between each other, and the and the and 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 with the use of it, it's needed energy is needed for it to contract. So Myosin must bind to ATP because it supplies energy for the muscle to contract via ATP hydrolysis and allows the myosin to bind in acting and tilting the myosin head for the contraction to occur. So the crossbreed formation, in order for that to happen, there is calcium ion. For that, it requires energy. So when the myosin head binds to the actin molecules, it requires energy. The release of an inorganic phosphate helps triggers the mechanism of the movement of thin filament and thick filaments. And as you go through along, it develops the sliding filament theory. So it repeats the attachments until the until energy is supplying the cross bridge formation. Once the energy is reduced, then ATP will bind another ATP will bind to the myosin and form again the cross bridge formation. And then it will slide past through the kinetic filaments, generating a muscle contraction. Next slide, please. So muscle relaxation happens when the calcium ion is returned to the sarcoplasmic reticulum, causing the muscle fibers to relax and the binding of the filament return to its relaxed state. So relaxation also requires energy. Muscle relaxation happens when there is no insufficient calcium ion binding or the release of the calcium ion stops due to the action potential, and, and therefore the binding sites will be covered by the tropomyosin. So it will return into its relaxed state. Next topic will be discussed by Mr. Flores about types of muscle contraction and force generation.
So we will be discussing the three types of muscle contractions: the isometric contractions, concentric contractions, and eccentric contractions. Isometric contractions generate force without changing the length of the muscle. Common in the muscle of the hand and forearm, and it is responsible for our grip. So for example, the muscle contraction required to grip but not move a heavy object prior to the lifting would be isometric. Isometric contractions are frequently used to maintain posture. Next is concentric contraction. A concentric contraction is a type of muscle contraction in which the muscle shortens while generating force, overcoming resistance. For example, when lifting a heavy weight, a concentric contraction of the bicep would cause the arm to bend at the elbow, lifting the weight towards the shoulder. Cross bridge cycling occurs, shortening of sarcomere, muscle fiber, and muscle. An eccentric contraction results in the elongation of a muscle while the muscle is still generating force. In effect, resistance is greater than force generated. Eccentric contractions can be both voluntary and involuntary. For example, a voluntary eccentric contraction would be the controlled lowering of the heavy weight raised during the above concentric contraction. An involuntary eccentric contraction may occur when a weight is too great for a muscle to bear, and so it is slowly lowered while under tension. Cross-bridge cycling occurs even though the sarcomere, muscle fiber, and muscle are lengthening, controlling the extension of the muscle. A motor unit consists of the motor neuron and the grouping of muscle fibers innervated by the neuron. The number of muscle fibers within the motor unit varies and is a function of the muscle's ability to accurate and refine motion. Precision is inversely proportional to the size of the motor unit. Thus, small motor units can exercise greater precision of movement compared to larger motor units. For instance, thigh muscles responsible for large, powerful movements can have 1,000 fibers in each unit, while eye muscles requiring small, precise movements might only have 10. Groups of motor units are innervated to coordinate contraction of a of a whole muscle and generate appropriate movement. The force generated by the contraction of muscle or shortening of the sarcomeres is called muscle tension. However, muscle tension is generated when the muscle is contracting against a load that does not move, resulting in two main types of skeletal muscle contractions: isotonic contraction and isometric contractions. Muscles exist in this state to optimize the force produced during contraction, which is modulated by the interlaced myofilaments of the sarcomere. When a sarcomere contracts, myosin heads attach to actin to form cross bridges. Then, the thin filaments slide over the thick filaments as the heads pull the actin. This results in sarcomere shortening, creating the tension of the muscle contraction. If a sarcomere is stretched too far, there will be insufficient overlap of the myofilaments, and the less force will be produced. If the muscles is over-contracted, the potential for further contraction is reduced, in which turn reduces the amount of force produced. So simply put, the tension generated in skeletal muscle is a function of the magnitude of overlap between actin and myosin filament. Speed of contraction also affects the amount of force produced. For concentric contraction, maximal force is achieved with slower contractions. The closer to zero velocity or static, the more force can be generated. With eccentric contraction, however, faster movement allows more force production. A single stimulus produces a muscle twitch. When a second stimulus is applied before the muscles are completely relaxed from an initial contraction, it exhibits a stronger contraction. This is called summation. Successive stimulation at the same frequency will generate a series of contractions with increasing tension, will produce a smooth and sustained contraction, and it is called tetanus. Stimulation of fibers generated muscle tension. The more motor units involved, the greater the force of contraction. A single threshold stimulus will produce a weak muscle contraction from a single motor unit. When a stronger stimulus is applied to the muscle, more motor units are activated simultaneously. These additional motor units are said to be required, and the increased tension results in stronger contraction of the whole muscle. Weaker motor units are required first. Stronger motor units are progressively added as more force required. When all motor units are activated simultaneously, the muscles generate its maximum contraction of force.